Hey, I'm Scott with Steel Horse Thunder. Hey, make sure you check us out on Facebook and on TikTok and see all of our other content. Today what we're doing, we're going to change the oil in a 2000 Road King Classic. What I have is, obviously you need a catch pan to catch your oil in. I've got 4 quarts of oil. That's what I'm going to need for this motorcycle. It is Mobil 1 is what I use. It's full 100% synthetic. I use 2050 where I live at. 2050 is a good all-around year. Motor oil, I don't have to worry about thinning it out when wintertime rolls around. I also have a socket wrench with a 5/8 socket to take the drain plug out. And then I have my extensions over here with a 17mm socket, and that's going to be to replace the oil filter. The K&N filters, the reason I like these is that right there. You just screw it on, screw it off with that right there. You don't have to try to slide a wrench up in there. It works really well. And then this is the most important thing you're going to need in order to do this. So, all right, so what I'm going to do now, I got my floor jack here. If I jack this motorcycle up like you normally would to get it up in the air, what happens is all my drain plugs are right here, and I can't find a place to put you can't put a pan in there or anything else. So this is what I do. Now you're going to have to be able to get down on your knees. If I can do it at my age, I know you can too. So I'm going to roll this up, and all I'm doing is catching the very front with just one side. I'm going to catch the very front right here, just so I can stand this bike up straight. Now in order to go all the way through, I've got to pull the bike up a little bit, stand the bike straight up so I can roll that through just like that. Now as you can see, all I'm doing, that front wheel is still on the ground. All I'm doing is getting this to where I just want to keep that where it's standing straight up. So now that I got that where I want it, I'm going to take my socket wrench, my drain pan. This is going to be some camera work right here, because we're going to have to go up underneath here, and I'm going to the drain plug on these, because you have your transmission is right here, comes straight down, but on the front there is a 5/8 inch drain plug. Now this drain plug is not a vertical one, it's actually horizontal, so it's actually sticking out to the front of the block. Of course I didn't loosen it enough. All right, we're just gonna I did it where then you just reach right up here, right behind your passenger peg, and that is your oil dipstick. Pull that out, allow the oil to run freely, and now we'll let it catch, and we'll let that oil drain for a minute. Now what you want to do is you want to look at your drain plug, and you want to look, you're checking out your O-ring, make sure that O-ring is still good. O-ring looks good, and you can see there's very little mud on there. Very little of any kind of shavings or anything like that on there, and that's what you want to see. You want to see it nice and clean like that. That right there is really good. Now I'm just one of those guys, I like to clean the plug off before I put it back in. Let that drain a little bit, and then we're going to change the filter after that drains out so I don't get too much oil all over the floor. All right, well that's draining. Let's go to the other side of the motorcycle. Let me bring my I'll need my socket wrench. We'll leave the 5/8 on this side because that's where we're going to need it. We're going to take our 17 millimeter with a 4-inch extension. Actually, it's about a 6-inch extension on this one. And you see the oil filter is right here. Okay? So we're going to have to go in there on that. Now, what I want to do first, I want to let that drain just a little bit, because this is going to cause a lot of oil. So this is where, what we do with our piece. There it is. The most important piece right here. Doesn't have to be Michelob, but it sure does help. All I do is try to squeeze this in right back here. And I just slide it up underneath it, just like that. And what that's going to do is let that oil come down and drip right down here. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to cheat today. I'm going to come over here. I should have another tray, another oil catch pan, which I probably don't. All right, we're going to have to wait. Only because I want to bring another catch pan over here. Used to have 2 of them around here. Don't know where the second one went to. Probably should have taken a look for that. And when you do this, you always want to make sure you get your motorcycle up to temperature. Get the oil a little warm. You don't want to, you don't do this. Don't go out and ride 200-300 miles and then come home and just think you're just going to hop underneath there and do it. You don't want that, but you do want the motorcycle to run. Obviously in the summertime it's not as important, but you do want the motorcycle at the temperature to make sure you're draining all that oil out of there. Make sure it's warm enough to come out. Obviously the hotter the oil is, the easier it is to get it to drain. So that is just about done. And then what we'll do is I'll bring that pan around here, and as I start to loosen up that oil filter, we're hoping now, this is not my favorite design. In fact, let's do this step right now. Here's the new filter right here. Now here's the thing with these twin cam 88 motors, they'll tell you you absolutely have to put oil in the filter first. And then what happens? Oh yeah, you got to turn it sideways to put it on the bike. Guess what? You're going to spill more oil. So what I do to try to help out, I go ahead and add some oil to it now. That way it soaks into the filter a little bit. I found that I don't necessarily have to have it completely full, but I have found that if I just fill that up like that, that's going to soak into that filter. And that is generally good enough to keep you from having any kind of vapor lock in there or anything like that. Now let me just throw my disclaimer out. I am not a professional mechanic, okay? I've put 165,000 miles on this motorcycle, and I have done this myself since I bought it brand new back in 2000. And here's the other thing. Harley Davidson will tell you to do this every 5,000 miles. You change your motor oil every 5,000, you change your transmission every 5,000, and you change your primary every 5,000 miles. Here's what I'll tell you. Now again, this was back in the day before there was any kind of synthetic motor oil. This motorcycle here, every 2,500 miles I change oil and filter. Every 2,500. And then every 5,000 I do the transmission and the primary. All right, so I think this is about done. I think what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and put the plug back in so it stops dripping. I made a bit of a mess anyway, but we'll put the plug back in here. And then, what did I do? Leave the plug on that side? Of course I did. All right, I'm just going to put this plug in here. All right, we're going to slide that pan out. Now that was still draining. I have a taller pan, catch pan, that I'm going to use. Because this will actually slide back underneath there. That way I can let it continue draining. There was a little bit more in there. I still had a steady stream, small, but this way. Oh yeah, this will fit underneath there. This is the only drawback to when you're doing it without it being on a lift anymore. A lot of times I will put this on the lift table and do it right there. But, all right. That's a little extra step you won't normally have to do right there. All right, so now I've got it finishing draining over on that side. Let's see here. Well, let's get this. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's going to work just fine. Just like that. I can bring this pan over to here. And here's the good news. The worst thing that could happen is I make a mess on the floor and I got to clean it up. All right. So I'm actually going to use a longer extension on this. That way I'm not in the way of everything. 17 millimeter. If you're using a K&N filter, if you're not using K&N filter, you can slide, believe it or not, you can actually slide a regular ring kind on here to open it, but I mean, you will cuss everybody you've ever met. This right here just makes it so much nicer. See, it's already starting to drip a little bit. And as you can see, got a little bit of oil still coming down here. And that, my friend, is all you need to know. It was a great idea. This one was a little too short. I should have used a longer one to bring it out a little farther. Well, you know what they say, it worked in rehearsal. All right, wasn't a whole lot of oil coming out of there anyway. So now I am going to go ahead. This looks pretty clean. Yeah, that's nice and clean. I'm going to take my new filter. I'm just going to use some of that oil that was on there just to run it around that gasket right there. I'm simply going to put it back in place. And as you can tell, that oil has soaked up into that Let me take my fancy oil guard out. I do want to just kind of, so you can see I'm laying that down now. Nothing's really leaking out. It will if I leave it there, but I'm going to clean all that up. These, it's just a matter of you got to have it perfectly square. I know it's round. How do you get it perfectly square? I'll go tighten it up. That's all the tight you need it to be. I'll put this back in here. All right. Yeah, made a little bit of a mess, but we're all right. All right, so the new filter is on. Now we're going to come over here, back to the other side. We're going to use our 5/8 socket, and we're going to put this drain plug back in. Yeah, I made a bit of a mess, but it's all right. All right, the drain plug is back in. Kept our mess to a minimum. Always wipe off the tools when you're done, when you got oil all over them. All right, so now it's just a matter of putting the oil in. These motors in the touring bikes, this Road King, it holds 4 quarts of oil. Now, like I said, I put 165,000 miles on this motorcycle, and what I learned is that this motorcycle is going to burn off a 1/2 quart of oil immediately. And it'll drop to 3.5 gallons of oil, or 3.5 quarts of oil, and it'll never drop any more than that. So let me grab my funnel over here. I like the long neck funnels. All right, again, dipstick is located right back here. We're just pulling that out. I will wipe it off. Now you can always double check when you're done. You know, you pull the dipstick out and double check it. I've done this a bazillion times already, so I know exactly how much it's going to use. First quart of oil I'm putting in is the one that I already opened up and put part of it in the filter, okay? So that's always the first one you want to use. These synthetic oils are amazing, but keep in mind, I had 127,000 miles on this bike, and Harley Davidson was doing a special thing where if you wanted to, you could bring your bike to a dealership. For $2,000, they'll take the motor off, they'll crate it, send it to Milwaukee, they'll go through the entire motor, put everything back to factory specs, ship it back, and the dealership puts it all back together on your motorcycle for $2 grand. And you ended up with a 2-year warranty. It was just like having a brand new motorcycle again. So I decided to do that. The information I got was this motor was clean as a whistle on the inside. They said even the stator came out in one piece, and they were saying it was kind of a waste of money for me doing that because this motor was in such good shape. And of course they were, oh, it just shows you what this synthetic oil does nowadays. Guys, I'd never used synthetic oil. I used nothing but conventional oil in this motorcycle the entire time I owned it, up until then. And they asked me, what's your secret then? And here's the secret. Number one, I don't hot rod the motorcycle. I'm not a hot rodder. I don't hot rod it. But the biggest trick is changing the fluids. Change your oil and filter every 2,500 miles. And then when you're changing it at the 5,000 mile mark, that's when you want to do your primary and your transmission. Because those things don't get as hot as the motor does. So therefore, letting it go to 5,000 is okay. But I would highly recommend that you change your motor oil every 2,500. And I know it's a lot more expensive now to change oil than it was 23 years ago. Trust me, I understand. Because anymore, if you're doing it yourself, you start buying the synthetic oil and the good filters and everything else. I mean, you're close to $100 by the time you're changing out everything. And I don't mean just the motor oil, but also your transmission and your primary. So it can get costly, I understand. But if you want to keep the motor running along, I've never had an issue with this bike. This motor has always been strong for me. I've had very, very few things done to it. And that's the other thing too. I didn't do a whole lot of customizing. When it came to the motor, I put a stage 1 kit on there. That's basically a K&N air filter. And I put different pipes on. That was it. That's all I've ever done. That's all I've ever done. Again, if you're not hot rodding, I'll be honest, I've had this bike up over 100 miles an hour back in the day. I've never wanted to go any faster than that. So, you know, where I'm at now, this bike here, 65, man, it's the magic spot for this motorcycle. 65, this bike just smiles at you. The whole time you're riding, you can just hear it just smiling at 65 miles an hour. It's a perfect bike for what I do. Yeah, I can get on the highway and I can run 80, 85 miles an hour down the road and everything else. I just don't have a desire to do that anymore. All right, so now I've got 3 quarts in there. And that's counting what I put in the filter. So I got 3 empty quarts here. I'm going to put a half a quart in here. And that's what I started doing a long, long time ago. I know it's going to burn it up, so why waste the oil? So I'm going to put 3.5 quarts of oil in this thing. And the nice thing is, if you didn't drain every ounce of oil out of this, you know, I can promise you there's not a half a quart of oil left in it. But there may have been a little bit. And now it's no big deal. Because I'm only going to put in half of it. Nice. Just a smidget. And we are golden. All right, now I did everything with this motor standing straight up. I wanted to make sure everything drained real good. But when you check your oil in this, you always check your oil with it sitting on the Jiffy Stand, the kickstand. I always called it a kickstand. No, it's not a kickstand. It's a Jiffy Stand. So that kickstand, they call it a Jiffy Stand. Make sure it's sitting on that. Don't check your oil while it's up on here. You wanna make sure it's down on where it belongs. I usually just set that in there like that. I'm gonna move everything. I'm just moving stuff out of the way over here. This other thing of oil. Make sure my stand is down all the way. Then I'm simply just gonna lower the jack. Hang on to the handlebars. Whoop. Lower that down. Pull that out of the other side. And there you go. And then if you want, you can double check it. Like I said, I know where it's going to be because I've done this one 1,000 times. And as you can see, it's just down right here. This is your safe area. I'm right about here, so I'm just a little over the halfway point. And like I said, at that halfway point, it's going to be down to there by tomorrow. And it'll never go any farther than that. That's just the way this particular bike has always been. Your bike may be different. But that right there is all there is to changing the oil. And if you do it every 2,500 miles, I promise you your motor will last you twice as long.